So primarily today, it's going to be talking about the Microsoft 365 Business Premium license. And as we go through this, it'll kind of start becoming apparent why we talk about the Business Premium license so much. From a Microsoft perspective, and ourselves at GeoCom, we call it what's known as the Hero SKU. And the reason we do that is because it includes some really, really effective tools inside of what's known as SMB Security. If we go on to the fair slightly, and we can kind of start delving into all this a little bit more. But what I wanted to start off with doing was kind of set the tone a little bit for this, set the scene a little bit from Microsoft and a security perspective. So SMB market is kind of what we focus on here at GeoCom as part of our Microsoft offering. And the big thing is the SMB market is becoming more and more vulnerable than it ever has done before. Microsoft runs annually something which is known as the Cyber Digital Defense Report. And as a part of that defense report, it takes global statistics and information that Microsoft have available to them from trillions of different security points that come into them every single day. And with that, they basically build this big picture. And that picture basically shows the SMB market is becoming more vulnerable and more targeted. So SMBs are, as it says on the screen there, becoming that bread and butter for cyber criminals. And the reason for that is because you'll all be well aware of the Marks and Spencer attacks, the Jaguar Land Rover attacks of the world, and all these things that have happened in recent times. And kind of one of the big core pieces of that is it causes large-scale political fallout. You know, taxpayer money gets involved in the equation, questions gets raised and answered. And as a part of that, you're tending to see that it raises more questions, it raises the profile on a political stage, which means that these organizations then become vastly more targeted by government entities that want to, crack down on them and be the one that catches them with the flashy headlines, etc. So one of the things we are seeing now is that switch to targeting SMBs, which comes with far less consequences, and in most instances as well, far easier for them to potentially impact several small businesses with the same kind of cost implications as what a large enterprise business would bring to the table. We've got a piece on there that says the true impact of cybercrime is kind of unknown. The reason that I kind of like to put that in there as well as a talking point for us here is purely from the perspective of not enough people know when they've actually been attacked. So when somebody's actually had a cyber attack against them, you'll often find that it can be anywhere up to about 200 days that they can be in your systems before anybody even realizes they were there, which is absolutely mind-blowing to think about in this day and age. It really is. And obviously, I've got to mention on there as well, because the role of an MSP, so the team here at Klipboard, is absolutely essential in securing SMBs up and down the country. We here at GeoCom work with hundreds, bordering on thousands of MSPs like Klipboard up and down the UK, and the role that they play in ensuring people reach compliance levels and the latest rules and regulations on an international scale in most instances is absolutely essential for people to be able to stay up to date and on target to hit certain requirements for new legislation that's coming into place, because this sort of thing is happening all of the time. And then the very last one on there, if cybercrime was an economy, it would rank as the third largest economy globally. And this number comes into obviously the trillions, as you'd expect, but it literally sits just behind the USA and China and ahead of India in terms of where it would rank in terms of, the amount of income that comes from cybercrime on a global scale yearly. And like I say, that is only based on what's reported, because where in the UK you have to report a cybercrime, that's not the case everywhere else globally. So that number could be even bigger potentially, which again is a scary thing to think about out there, shall we say. It's also actually, funnily enough, from the Digital Defense Report, it's actually the fastest growing economy in the world as well, which puts it again ahead of India and ahead of China. So to think about the scale of it increasing, it's dramatic. It really is. If we jump on to the next slide for us, Liam.
Yeah.
So, bit of a landscape here, looking at it from a Microsoft perspective here. So Microsoft currently employs 34,000 full-time security engineers across the world, which is pretty much bigger than anybody else that's out there currently that's doing this sort of thing. So 34,000 full-time engineers that are working on cybersecurity. 1.6 million bot-driven or fake account signups were blocked by Microsoft every hour in 2025, which again is an absolutely mind-blowing amount. But if you think of the amount of digital signups and the amount of times you hear about all these bot accounts inside of social media channels and things like that, it's not hard to see or imagine, is it? 5 billion emails are screened daily on average to protect users from malware and phishing, which again makes them among the top 3 kind of email scanners globally, with the likes of Google and others. And then the last one we've got on there as well, the USA, the UK, Germany and Israel were the most targeted nations for cyber attacks in 2025. Now, I put that one on there purely because I like to compare it to what it actually said in 2024, and the UK didn't fall in the top nations in that scenario because, as you'd expect, the Ukraine was heavily involved up there. Taiwan was quite heavily up there as well. All these places that have got, should we say, wars or things of that nature going on, where there's political unrest, they tend to fall higher on the scale. But for this year, the UK was right up there, and so was Germany, which obviously wasn't one that appeared in there last year also. So that's really interesting that we're seeing those economies start to be targeted now, both from an enterprise, SMB, government, and so on and so forth. So again, really interesting things. If we jump on the next slide, Liam. So, business premium, and back to kind of the fact at hand, shall we say. So, as you'll see on here, I've put the main 3 SMB SKUs that exist out there at the moment. We've got Business Basic, Business Standard, and Business Premium. Business Basic, Business Standard, I'm sure many of you on the call will be very au fait with what that includes. It's all of your basic productivity essentials that you need, and your SharePoints and OneDrives, etc. Again, most people will have these, and it'll fit the bill for them. Others start looking at Business Premium, and the reason we talk about Business Premium is because of that little pink dotted section you see around the bottom there with those 6 additional entities in, and I'll call each one of those out in just a few moments time. But just to touch on the Business Basic and the Business Standard for a moment, they do cover what we call foundational security inside of these. Now, this is basically giving you what Microsoft uses, the absolute basics to protect yourselves. This is not giving you any real security protection. It's just offering you the bare bones to be able to ensure that you can have a front door on the building, almost, if you imagine it being. So these are things like your identity and your access control. So that's your users' login credentials to access their account and their productivity tools. Exchange Online Protection, which is literally doing spam filters for you almost. Many people think that is offering you email security. It isn't. It is the bare bones basic when it comes to your spam style protection that comes within there. And last but not least, mobile device management. Now, there is a product in there that's called Entra ID, which is part of your identity management, and you can enroll your device in there so Microsoft can recognize it. But again, this isn't device management. This isn't going to be managing a mobile phone and things of that nature. This is purely around the identity of the device and nothing else. So again, bringing you some bare bones features and functionality there that's needed as a part of your infrastructure for onboarding onto Microsoft. Now, Business Premium, if we go on to the next slide, Liam, I'll start talking about the advanced features and how they compare for us. And the first one up, as I mentioned a moment ago, is called Entra ID. And we have what's known as Entra ID Plan 1 here. And in all honesty, the easiest way I can describe what Entra ID Plan 1 is it's all around your identity protection. So this is, again, you logging into your system, and quite often you'll have to do what's known as multi-factor authentication, or MFA for short, and that's centered around you needing to type in a, let's say, 6-digit code that comes from your phone via a text message, or you may use the Microsoft Authenticator app, for example. So a couple of different ways, but you type your password in, then you use your phone or something similar, your facial recognition, fingerprint scanner, etc., to prove that it is you through a second form of identification. Now, this overall package that comes in here contains some more advanced features than that. And if we kind of look at this as almost like, imagine it being a nightclub, and you've got a bouncer on the front door of that nightclub, and that bouncer is basically checking you are who you say you are. So you've provided your password, so you've told him your name, but then after that he's going, well, have you got your ID? That would be your multi-factor authentication coming in. And it's that, basically, that bouncer that's going to be the one that goes, do you have to show me your ID or don't you, sort of scenarios. And it's a really rudimentary way of looking at it there. They would also assist you with things like doing your self-service password reset, so you don't need to contact your IT department to do that resetting of the passwords, etc. And it really is providing those sorts of services for you so that you can gain access to the resources you need, whether they be cloud applications like Microsoft 365, it could be something like your Salesforce environment, it could be something that you have on-prem that sits on a server inside of the office and it's an application you've built as a business. various different things it will give you access to, but that's exactly what it is doing there. Proving you are who you say you are, and obviously elevating those privileges if you are an administrator as well, to make sure that you definitely are who you say you are, because you could cause some real damage if you aren't. So some really good protection there for individuals. We've gone to the next point for me, Liam. Intune. Now, Intune comes under that device management piece we mentioned on the previous slide. Now, Intune comes in kind of, I like to say it comes in two flavors. One's what we call mobile application management, and the other one is called device management. Now, mobile application management is for when you have something known as BYOD, bring your own device. So you would bring your own phone with you, bring your own laptop, and you can log into the work resources. It sounds great. What this basically gives you the ability to do as a business is ensure that when people access your data and your resources, it provides some control on that device, that should they leave the business, should that laptop get lost or the mobile phone get lost, you have the ability to remote wipe your confidential business data from that. So you can't wipe everything. You don't have access to their Netflix, their social media channels, their photos on their phone. You can't see any of that. You only see corporate data, and it gives you the ability to maintain your data, protect it, and wipe it in the eventuality that a worst case scenario happens for you. From an application perspective, a device management perspective, you're very much looking at that being a fully corporate device. So you buy your phone, you buy your laptop, give it to the new starter on day one. Intune will basically put in place everything they need to get going. It will download the apps for them. It can set the device up. It can put parameters in place to say you have to have a password and it has to be 10 digits long. It really will do almost like a start to finish setup of what those devices need to do and can do in their day-to-day roles. So it's brilliant from an MSP's perspective in terms of expediting that setup process for you and making it so that new starters can start quicker, can get off the ground running, but also from the perspective of if they are working out of the office, etc., you have the ability to protect your business data again, locking the devices, remote wiping those devices if needs be, and then obviously the ability to make sure that they've got all of the work applications they need. You launch a new app, a new system, you can give them access en masse from Intune without needing to bring them back in the office and do a traditional style download and install of those applications. So very powerful tool there from device management perspective. Next point for me, Liam, device security. Now, Defender for Business, looking at this from the perspective of a traditional style antivirus solution. I'm sure many of you will have had something on your laptop along the lines of a CrowdStrike product, or maybe even a Cronus' product in here, and various others that exist out there. Think of things like, old school Norton 360, McAfee products, and so on and so forth. Now, Microsoft Defender for Business is what we call an EDR solution. So that's extended detection and response. So it goes a little bit further than an old school AV solution like the Norton 360s of the day. And what this basically brings to the table is the ability to not just protect the device, but it will also do the remediation work after the fact. So once somebody has potentially broken into the device, how do we box them in, stop them from going any further? And as a part of that process as well, how do we then learn from that and ensure that we, kind of block that hole from coming in again? There is the piece it does before that as well, which is where it will make tailored recommendations on how to improve the security posture of your device as well. So if your laptop isn't up to date, or there is bits and pieces that need doing to it, it will make those recommendations as a part of its threat and vulnerability piece that it does with its initial assessments. So again, before the point, active protection, and then things that it will do after the fact to ensure that when somebody logs back in on Monday morning, they're potentially just going to be met with a normal device, normal environment, and they'd been on the wiser as to exactly what's gone on by your admins that are doing a little bit of work in the background to remediate things and patch that hole where they got into the systems. Also important to remember that this isn't specific to any particular browser. These solutions do work across Android, iOS, Windows, etc. So they will work across any device, and that's the same for Intune, Entra, Defender, and anything else that we talk about coming up as well. Next one for me there, Liam, Defender for Office 365. Traditional email security style solution here. Looking at things like safe links and safe attachments to make sure when you press a link, it's secure. When you press an attachment, it's secure. The thing that really takes this a little bit further here, and again, looking at the digital defense report from Microsoft last year, is it's also starting to protect what we call collaboration, which means it's protecting inside of your team's environment. One of the very active threats that was starting to be on the rise last year was people coming in via Microsoft Teams, speaking to one of your colleagues, pretending to be the IT service desk and going, oh, can you just log into this system for me? We need to just run an update. And they'd send them a link, they'd log into it, but lo and behold, they've been suspect to what is in form of a phishing attack, and they've taken their login credentials away, sold them on the dark web, or even performed malicious acts and intentions themselves. So again, that was something we saw on the rise, and what Defender for Office 365 does is it will protect your users by scanning those links that get sent into them by those third parties when they click on them. Again, offering that protection not just inside your email, but also inside of your Teams environment as well. And another really important fact that sits in there as well is something that we call time of click protection, which basically means that every single time they press the link, it's checking the link is exactly what it says it is. And that's really important because some solutions will only check it the first time that you'll click on it, not every time. And that'll basically mean that you click on it the first time, it all looks great. I'll come back to that and I'll do that work later. You go click on it on Monday morning after the weekend's gone, and they've switched where that link is actually routing to. It forwards you to a malicious website, which in turn is going to throw a load of malicious malware, etc. at you, potentially executable files, things like that, stuff you really don't want people playing around with. So again, really, really important piece of technology that's built into it there. And that should leave us on to data security, which is something Liam's actually already mentioned in there in Microsoft Purview, which was them retention policies that we were looking at. Now, Purview is actually a family of products, and Business Premium is the entry point for coming into these Purview products. And I'll be completely honest, this is probably what I talk about more than anything at the moment, because it's all around data loss prevention, protecting that data, whether no matter where it is, even if it leaks off the system, it can still be protected. And then the other part of this as well that comes in is the data lifecycle aspect as well. So kind of the core pillars of Purview is around data security, data governance, and then there is the data gone off the top of my tongue there now. It's data governance, data protection, and the data loss aspect, as well, that comes in there with that. And what we're going to basically look at from that perspective is using what we call data loss prevention, which will do policies and procedures so that if somebody attempted to send out a email and it, let's say for instance, contained a 16-digit credit card number, it would flag it to them and say, no, you can't do that. Or it may be, for instance, something silly like trying to send an attachment that had credit card numbers in it. Again, it would block that activity and say, no, you can't do that. You dictate these yourselves, of course, based on your user requirements and your instances that are needed. Also carries all the features you need to be able to encrypt your emails in the eventuality you are sending out sensitive documents to particular customers. It provides that piece where the email can be encrypted and they have to provide, say who they say they are, log into it in order to gain access to those emails and things of that nature. So again, really important set of tools. Anybody that comes under kind of compliance management rules or is interested in kind of, protecting their data, especially in like AI solutions like Copilot, ChatGPT, those sorts of things, Purview is really the entry point into protecting your data inside of those AI tools, whether they be Microsoft or third-party based. Next slide for us, Liam. In the interest of time, I think I've chatted away quite a bit here.
Oh, we're at the end. There you go. Yep.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Easy as that. So yeah, like I said, that's kind of the overarching pieces of Business Premium, and that is the reason that we talk about it so much, is because a lot of these features and functions used to be part of what Microsoft called the 365 E5 license, which was, very, very costly E5 enterprise level license, circa £50 a user per month sort of thing. And what they did was realize that SMBs need this technology as well. So they basically took the core components, brought it down into the SMB space in the Business Premium license. And to be fair with you now, it's probably, in terms of Microsoft SKUs, the one that, again, is being talked about the most, purely because you get so much feature and capability, at a very, very reasonable price. And again, it's giving you all the tools and features that you need for introducing modern AI technologies like Copilots, ChatGPTs, Geminis, Claude, and all these other tools that people are currently talking about. And, Business Premium really is the center point for protecting your data when it's when people are utilizing these tools. I'll hand back over to you, Liam, then.
Right.
If anyone's had any questions or anything for us as we've gone through.
That's really, I mean, any of my customers that are part of this will know we've been using this license now for a number of years. But if you're still using an Office 365 E3 license, for example, you really need to be looking at some of this, because there are features in here that are just essential to running your tenant in Microsoft 365, let alone all the extra good stuff that James is mentioning about Intune, about Purview, for example.